welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am your co-host, Ray Russell, and this week, guys, we dive back into Georgia Championship Wrestling one more time, but this time we're heading back to the beginning of Bob's time there, working underneath Ole Anderson, Jim Barnett, and crew, going back to the early days of 1983. We're going to talk all about Bob's time working in the ring and behind the scenes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the man back himself. Welcome back, Bob Roop.
Oh, thank you, Ray. It's good to be back, and hello out there. Really glad to be back talking to you. We missed a week. I actually missed doing this because I feel like I'm not just communicating with Ray Russell, my buddy, but with people out there who tune into us. Ray explained to me that we have a fairly decent audience, and so I'm glad to have you out there today, and I appreciate you giving us an ear.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've had a lot of great feedback, specifically in recent weeks with the telling of the tale of Georgia Championship Wrestling and Ole Anderson overtaking Jim Barnett. And, of course, Barnett getting his revenge at the end of the day, because last we left off, Mr. Vince McMahon walks in and takes over TBS Studios, takes over Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Championship Wrestling, call it what you want. But Vince takes over, and we covered everything in between. And it all starts right before you arrive. So it's kind of funny that at the end of December 1982 is when Ole goes up to Barnett's home and says, yeah, you're not running this shit anymore. I'm going to take over now because we don't know where this money's going, but it ain't going back into business. And so we talked all at length about that. And of course, Barnett's revenge at the end was kind of aligning himself with Vince McMahon, talking to some of the guys and getting them to sell the stocks to Vince and the World Wrestling Federation. But it all started really back in December of 82, and you arrive at the beginning of February 5th, TV in 1983. So you just missed the shitstorm, or at least the beginning of the shitstorm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. When that timing is all. Ole never talked about that. That timing is all news to me, and I was surprised at how close it was to when I did actually get there. I had the impression that not only was a take charge guy, so he was a great executive. You know why? Because he could answer any question, anything you need to know about.
Might not like the answer, but he can definitely answer it.
Yeah. An executive is someone who executes things, and I don't mean like a guillotine guy or a hangman, but who executes.
Maybe that too.
Well, yeah. He was an executive in terms of he knew what he wanted, and maybe that's why he was so brusque sometimes. He had a plan. We knew. We went in past episodes. We talked about how he had no knowledge about the drug use, which is almost. I mean, think about it. I reflected on that he could be in a business where like 80% of the people are doing drugs, and he didn't know about it. He knew about it, but he wasn't aware at all about the depth, breadth, and width of how rife it was, how many people were doing it. Mm-hmm. And here's the guy he didn't have any use for that kind of stuff. His mind was always on business. What was the thing to do? And the fact that the guy because he was booking not just Atlanta, he was booking in Canada. I can't think of the name of the guy.
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto, and he was booking. I think he might have be booking some towns in Carolina. I'm not sure, but it seemed like one time he was telling me he was booking like 6 towns a night. Well, he had a lot on his mind to be thinking about that. Without Bert, the wrestlers got all the time in the world, driving up down the road all day. They can gossip all day, whine, complain, do drugs, get drunk, sober up, get drunk again sometimes on some of those trips. He didn't do that. He had so many things in his mind about a business and the right thing to do everywhere. He didn't have time to mess around. And that's why I think why he was so brusque. I think part of it was his personal characteristic of just he was aggressive, very aggressive. But I think the other part was he just didn't have time to waste of being nice. Hey, how you doing? How's the wife? All that. His greeting after maybe not seen anybody for 3 or 4 years. It's okay. All right, you're here. What do you want?
No, absolutely. And that's where we left off was basically Ole's demise as far as running Georgia Championship Wrestling and having that 6:05 p.m. time slot there on TBS. And obviously Ole's going to have to start from scratch, build up Championship Wrestling from Georgia, and get a Saturday morning slot. And we're going to talk all about that when we get back to that time period. But as we closed up the end of Georgia as we knew it, I wanted to go back to your time now here and talk about Bob Roop's time and maybe some of your memories of the talent that came through here, some of the guys you worked with, maybe not even necessarily stories you might have from Georgia on these guys, but it's the first time I'm seeing a lot of these names that you're crossing paths with here. So I thought, it'd be a good time to throw some new names at you.
Sure. It was good.
All right. So in the past, I've seen a lot of names here. We told the story of Buck Robley kind of coming to you at the bar and saying, Hey Bob, how about us, running opposition to Ole? We told that story, and it was insane too the way you told that story, because if you go and look, you see when Robley's there, you see when you come in, and you can kind of guesstimate exactly when he came to you. It was within a matter of weeks, if I remember correctly, when I did the research in the past, and then they're gone. Robley and Brody disappear because you went back to the office and said, "Hey man, you guys might have some problems here. Robley's wanting to run opposition, and bye Buck." And, you've said in the past, there's probably some people out there that might go, well, that's a hypocritical thing to do considering your past history, but you would learn from your mistakes and you appreciated this job. And you said, I'm not going to, sit here, have somebody feed me this and just let it go. So obviously we've told that story. You told the fun story. I believe it was your niece and Ray Candy or someone in your family and Ray walking in on Ray Candy sleeping there.
Yeah.
We said goodbye to Matt Bourne, so we've already kind of talked about Matt Bourne coming in and his demons and his ousting. Buzz Sawyer, I'm sure more stories will likely pop up. You were around Buzz for, unfortunately, quite a while here in Georgia, so maybe some other things will be triggered and you'll have more Buzz Sawyer stories, but we've already told a couple and they're quite interesting. We talked the firing of Paul Orndorff, so we've gotten in some good stories about Georgia along the way. Sheik and Ole getting into it, but kind of in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, but it's still a fun time.
Sheik was just playing around, and Ole, he didn't realize, when you told me a show or two ago where Ole liked to hurt people, I always thought, when he opened up with that time with the keys where he used the key to put a divot from the back of his head to the front of his head, then I thought, Ole would feel, I'd feel bad if I did that to somebody. Ole enjoyed it.
I'm sure he didn't give that.
Great.
I doubt he gave that a second thought.
Yeah, he thought that was great. Yeah, I can't tell this one story about Sheik, but it's because I know his wife, so I don't want to say anything untoward. But Ole was he didn't have time. He didn't think about it. He's leaving his wife and 6 kids. He's seeing them maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. And I don't know if he even ever took a full day off because we usually ran shows on Sunday too. But so he didn't have time. And plus, he was making money hand over fist. Imagine get to the place where you're not only, running the company and drawing a great salary and that, but you got a percentage of towns too, where you're getting that extra money coming in. You're making, thousands of dollars every week, where you're making more than an NWA world champion and maybe even Andre, So, my hat's off to him because most of the guys I talk to, their only reason, when I used to tell people I don't care about making money, they looked at me like I was crazy. They said the only reason to be in this business is to make money.
Right.
Why would we leave our homes and be on the road and put up all this crap and, shower sometimes and, like almost in a sewer if you want to shower and put up with all this crap and drive 350 miles starting about 10 o'clock at night, driving back home. Why would we put up with all this stuff if it wasn't for the money? And I said, well, I like to travel for one thing. and I did. Now, once you're in a territory and you're traveling the same place all the time, that traveling part of it was it was satisfied. And that's why I never stayed in one place too long. still remember the stat of Bret Hart staying 14 years in New York. My entire career was 20 years long. And in that 14 years, I probably traveled to 10 different foreign countries and worked in 7 or 8 territories in the United States because I didn't want to be in one place. Now, some people like that, of course. Now, I didn't have young kids in school. So if someone had that, yes, they would want to stay in one place, and I wouldn't blame them. That wasn't my shtick. So the money wasn't critical, and maybe I should regret that today, but it really doesn't do anything good to have regrets where you are now, because there's not much you can do about what's already happened. It's just don't repeat them. That's all. But anyway, Dr. Psychobabble had to jump in early, so.
Well, Ole was a man of many hats, and I don't think a lot of people. You go, okay, he was a promoter and he was a wrestler, but I mean, just think about a day in the life of Ole Anderson trying to again book. So he's a booker. He's booking all the matches for various. At one point, he was doing the booking for Crockett and Georgia, and while working for Crockett was sending his guys to the Tunnies until Vince took over up there in Toronto. So yeah, Ole, when he was booking in Crockett, I assume that's when he was booking for Toronto as well. So he had a lot on his plate, TV-wise, house show-wise, who's sending, who wear the A shows, the B shows, whatever you want to call those on, and everybody's going everywhere. But Ole himself, still a wrestler. So he's having to get in that car and make those drives a lot as well, especially prior to your time coming here in 83. And I go back just a year before this, thinking about it, Ole's on Crockett TV. He's cutting promos as a wrestler on Crockett TV. He's wrestling on JCP TV, but he's also down on TBS cutting promos and wrestling while he's still producing the show behind the scenes. It's insane to think about, okay, well, I'm going to talk to these guys about what I need today, but then I got to run out here real quick and talk to Gordon about my match on tomorrow at the Omni. But then Buzz Sawyer, it just turned heel and he's not the greatest promo yet. So I'm going to go out there with Buzz and give him the boost he needs by putting him over, help him along with his promo. And then I'm going to go backstage and go back and produce some more. So there's just, I mean, it's a constant motion in your mind. There's very few people that could handle all of that. I mean, you talk about a ball of stress, and I'm not saying Ole wasn't stressed, but he just handled it well enough to make it all work for quite a long time.
Yeah. And, as far as the stress, he didn't drink. I mean, he'd have a beer, but I don't remember if I ever saw him have 2. Once in a while after day we had a couple hours to kill, we're right there in the Omni, so there are places, beer bars and everything in there. We might have a beer, but I never saw him drink more than one. I know he didn't smoke. He didn't do drugs. We went through the part about him not even knowing about drugs very much. No, he was all business. And, like I said earlier, the amount of money that he was making per hour, who knows? $1,000, who knows how much he was making. And he also was smart enough to know from his own actions with Barnett that the end could come, and it probably would sometimes. He wasn't established like, say, Crockett over there in the Carolinas, where he had such a strong, foothold in all those towns, but he'd been running for 40 years or whatever. He didn't have that kind of hold. And the situation with Barnett showed that even his tenure, because you had that stock out there, those points that could be rearranged to kick him out, like it eventually did, he knew that was possible. And we think about it, he was probably thinking it might come at any time. Not worried about it, but realizing that it could. And especially once McMahon showed up got into the picture. So he was doing everything he could to make as much money as he could, as quickly as he could. And again, because he didn't have these distractions of drugs and booze and women and all the stuff that a lot of the boys did, he had all kinds of time to concentrate on that. And he did. Regardless of him losing out at the end, he got to sell his stock and got some money for that. But he made a lot of money there. He was there, I don't know, a couple of years. He probably made $1 million at least. I don't know. He was sharp. I mean, Ole was one of the reasons. We'll go back to Buck Roby coming to me. Roby probably thought again, because I tried opposition twice before, not once. but twice. He probably figured I was just this guy looking to go opposition just because I like doing it or something. And, believe me, I learned my lesson after the second one. There's no way you're going to do it.
Brody, well, we already know Bob Roop's in, so we'll go get him, and then we'll worry about the rest of the guys.
Yeah. Oh, Bob will be a cinch. He's just waiting. He's looking for another opportunity. No. But the other thing was I respected Ole. And the thing is, I had a minimum guarantee with Ole. I told him how much I wanted to make, and we not bickered, but we dickered a little bit and came up close to what I wanted. And I knew that was guaranteed every week. So I didn't have to worry about getting screwed. Financially, that was my reason. That was my reason in both cases. Well, not so much with Shires out there. All those other promoters came to me with Shires. But with Fuller, it was the money. It was the money that was the reason. He actually forced my hand. It was either leave or do something and stay there and try to show him that he couldn't get away with it. But with Ole, that was never there. And the other thing was I respected him. If you think about it, we're very close to the same age. We both did 3 years in service. We both wrestled in college. We had a lot of things in common that I didn't have with other wrestlers. And that might be one of the reasons that he was so different, because he had that kind of background too. Plus he had that Polish, Slavic, some area of the Slavic creed. He had that, had a certain way of living, of hard work and dedication and long hours without complaint. It's just part of the cultural heritage. He had that going for him too. So, he was different. But look what he did. He was a
successful guy, not just in wrestling, but like we talked about, he had that lumber business and things. So he was a jack of many trades, and I won't say all trades, but many trades. And he definitely was a successful human being. I mean, if you're looking at it from a financial point of view anyway, I can't really speak for him, outside of that. I don't know him didn't know him personally, but yeah, that's a nice little bow to put on the Ole Anderson story for now. I'm sure he's going to come up time and time again because we're going to be talking about Georgia here, but wanted to get into some of the other names. Looks like you arrive on the February 5th, 1983 TV show. Now, you don't wrestle there. You just come out and you introduce yourself. I'm Bob Roop, and I'm here now, and I'm a heel. I'm an asshole, guys, so get used to it. I'm sure Gordon said, brother. All right, and we go on to the very next day, your first match here in this run, February 6th, Sunday, at the Omni. So you kick things off right there in the Omni, scoring a win over Brad Armstrong. And Brad had been here. Everybody already knew who Brad was going back to 1981. He comes in with his father, the Bullet, Bob Armstrong, and they win the national tag team titles at the Thanksgiving night tournament for the belts. And Brad had the feud along with his dad with Roddy Piper. And that kind of really gave Brad the boost in the beginning of 1982. So Georgia fans knew Brad very well, and they'd come to love Brad as a young, up-and-coming, fresh, white meat baby face. And here comes old, bad, grizzled veteran Bob Roop in here to stretch him, no doubt, a little, maybe. And you pick up a win the first night out there over Brad Armstrong. So clearly, as soon as you come in, Ole has some idea that he wants to do something with you.
Your information about Brad was new to me. I just got there. I hadn't been aware,
sure.
And I hadn't been watching her TV.
You're not a wrestling fan, and even if you were, it's hard to keep up with what's going on in all the different territories, right? So
right. Well, I had been up at my helping my mother get used to my dad passing away suddenly. Right. I'd been out of business for 6 months. I didn't watch TV. And I certainly didn't watch wrestling. Don't get me wrong, but when you live wrestling every day for years, why do you want to? I mean, I might watch.
No, you don't have to explain it to me. I mean, you probably do have to explain that to some of the listeners out there, I suppose. How does he not like wrestling? No, I totally get it, Bob. There's things that I do, and it's like I don't want to do this. I'm already doing it myself. So I don't want to watch somebody else do it. So I totally get you.
Oh well, I got a story about watching the TV. I don't know, but I had the woman I married, Molly, had come up to Knoxville from Fort Lauderdale, where she lived. I flew her up for a week or two, and we were starting to get back together again. But in the interim, when we were separated, I had brought a girl from California, had flown in to Atlanta, and I had done something with her where she showed up on television. We did something with the wrestling. I don't remember what it was.
Oh.
Wasn't it the matches? But she was on TV, and she had been a bone of contention earlier in my relationship with my wife, Molly.
Right.
With me sending Molly back home from California. Back
San
to Florida.
Francisco. I remember that story.
Yeah. Well, that same girl is on the TV, and I'm in our apartment, and Molly's there, and I'm not going to tell her the girl was there because that's the last thing she wants to know. And so I'm watching that TV. So about the time that the girl's going to be appearing, she's only be appearing for about 3 or 4 seconds. But about the time she's going to be appearing, I made sure Molly was somewhere else. But I remember that's one of the few times I watched that show. But yeah, guilty. Well, I mean, I hadn't done anything wrong. I wasn't engaged to Molly or anything. In fact, I wasn't even seeing Molly at the time. But still, I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So.
No, I get you, but that's kind of interesting. She pops up on the TV screen. What is she doing in town? What are the odds?
Yeah. Well, Molly, I was just making one last check. Whether it's going to be her or you. It would have had to been her because Molly would have left. Well, you son of a, yeah. Oh, you got me in a test. Well, I got one for you. Try doing it alone.
Well, you might not have said anything, Bob, but I'm sure the silence was deafening. Sometimes
the other thing, yeah, I've seen people that would actually. I mean, this is kind of negative, but guys that really abuse their wives, their girlfriends, and then go, maybe some drunk and come in and fall and go to sleep after they do it. I was sitting in my living room one day, and above us, we had a neighbor, and I had gotten to know the young lady that was part of the couple that lived up there. Very pleasant girl. And one day I'm sitting in my living room watching TV and had a big double wide sliding door where you could see outside. And this girl coming feet first. She had jumped off the balcony upstairs and came and landed in a pile of snow. It was a winter and there was snow on the ground, and landed in a pile of snow on her feet. And I ran over and opened the sliding glass door and invited her in. She was in a nightgown. She had on a nightie. She had snow up to her ankles, no shoes on. So I invited her in, and what had happened was her boyfriend came home, and I don't know, he didn't beat her up. She wasn't cut or bruised or black-eyed, but he smacked her or something, and then he went to sleep and passed out or whatever. Well, she got a baseball bat and went over and whacked him on his shin. And I mean, whacked him. And he couldn't walk, but he was crawling after. He was going to, he was a pretty big guy. He was crawling after. He was going to get her, and he backed her. She got trapped out on a terrace, so she jumped off it. And I really did the wrong thing, but I went and grabbed the guy and took him out and threw him in a big pile of snow and told him if he I had no business doing this. The guy could have shot me and got away with it probably, but I just told him if he ever did anything like that again, I'm going to break him in two. But little incidents come up where you do stupid things, but I never wanted to get in that. I never put a violent hand on my wife or any woman, any man or boy or whoever. It could be a girl. If you bully someone weaker than you, you're a coward, and you're just basically a coward.
Well, there was that lady in San Francisco had to kind of subdue, right?
Well, she weighed more than I did,
Well, yeah,
you're right. But you know what?
That was an attack, though. That was.
Yeah,
defense,
I didn't hurt her at all. I mean, it looked like I hurt her when her ear bled, and the Japanese boy and the Russian took off trying to run and make sure their green cards are going to stay in their wallet. But yeah, I was just defending myself there. If she hadn't slapped me, I mean, if she slapped me and left it at that would have been it. But she wanted to try to get another one in, and I wasn't going for that.
It's always a peculiar moment. You don't have to be in the wrestling business to encounter crazy things just randomly happening. I mean, I totally get it. It's like you make a decision at that split second. Is it always the right decision? Maybe not. Maybe not the best call, but I mean, it's admirable at the very least. I want to run back here to your first week in Georgia because it's kind of interesting. So you come in, you do the TV, obviously, you promote yourself for the show with the Omni, you go over Brad Armstrong, so you're going to get some kind of a push heading into this
Right.
shindig here, your time in Georgia. But the first week you're here, Monday through Friday, you're off to, it's a tour of up north. You're doing West Virginia, Michigan, and Ohio, random shows in all 3 states. So basically you're hopping on a plane just a day after you work the Omni, or maybe the night, I don't really know when you would have flown up, but that's really not the point. My point is, not counting Japan or Australia, where you may have had to take all these crazy boats and planes and things to get from island to island, or just from one side of the continent to the other. But here in the States proper, do you remember any other territory where you had to take a plane to get from one part of the territory? It seems very different. I'm just curious how you handled this initially. Like, holy shit, we don't just drive from town to town. We're actually getting flown from Georgia to Ohio?
No, not in the States. Australia, of course.
Right.
But just about every trip was by plane. But no, not in the States. Yeah, no, that was none of that. And I don't remember ever flying out of Knoxville and Florida. Well, in Florida, occasionally in Florida, we would fly to Miami.
Right, or Puerto Rico and things. I get that.
Oh, yes.
I just meant like on a constant basis like this in Georgia. It's something very different. Did you like that? Because you like to travel anyway. Did you like having to hop on planes, or was that kind of annoying? Like, man, I'd rather just drive a car every day.
Oh, I like the planes. You get tired. By that time, I started driving by myself anyway, which it was. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like I hated the voice or anything. It's just I wasn't close enough to anybody. I would ride with Ole if he was going somewhere, and usually he drove, but I would if he didn't. It wasn't until I was there a while and I met a few guys that I would travel with the Sheik, Khosrow, because he and I got along real well. But in Georgia, the trips weren't that long, and now in Ohio, I always had to double up, or at least the one time I was talking about with Ray Candy was just me and him, but sometimes another time it was me and DiBiase and Bundy.
Sure.
King Kong Bundy. So you couldn't always pick who you were going to get. And that's what was frustrating, was if you had, back in the days when it was dangerous to do pot even, because it actually much more dangerous than cocaine or uppers or downers, because you couldn't smell it, you couldn't see it, you didn't know why the person was the way they were.
Right.
They could say, well, I'm taking medication, I'm sick and all that, and there would be no way sort of giving them a blood test or maybe a breathalyzer that to be able to tell. I mean, as a person, like one peer to another. Like when Tommy, that time in Cincinnati, I just happened to know his background. He was in the same state he was when he rolled that car. But with other people, you can't tell. If you wanted to smoke, you had to be real careful about it. And I got to the point where I didn't enjoy traveling. I'm okay by myself. Always have been. I'm not thinking I'm the greatest guy in the world or anything, but I'm comfortable with my own company. I've read thousands of books. I've got all kinds of things in my head to think about, and I do that. I think in this country, you have to take philosophy in college or high school or somewhere. They actually tell you how to think. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't think. They just react to things. They watch TV and whatever. They don't sit there. I mean, especially youngsters, and there's nothing wrong with that. And by the other token is I wanted to say a memory that came to me was I hadn't been in the ring, or at least not on a regular basis, for months when I had my first match in Atlanta. And I remember getting whipped into a turnbuckle. Instead of turning and hitting with my back, I ran into, how guys are running into straight forward and then just back up. I ran into it straight forward, and it just felt awkward. I didn't enjoy being in the ring anymore. I just didn't have it. I just didn't have that love of being out there, and it wasn't being in front of the crowd had nothing to do with it. It just was my attitude. So within a not too long a period, I'll let you lead us, but it wasn't too much longer after that once I became a road agent, I didn't work as much.
Right.
Because if you're running a show, sometimes you just don't have time to go out there and get in the ring. There's too many things going on. And besides, Ole always wanted me to watch the box office, which was smart. That's where most of the stuff's going on in that box office. People figuring out ways to try to make, hey, there's a lot of green cabbage in all these drawers here. Let me see if I can, scare up a bit from my pocket. Yeah. So anyway, with Brad, I remember having a good match with him every time I worked with him, and what a great kid he was. At the time that I saw him and do him, he was young in the business. It was still fresh to him. He was a great talent. And he had the zeal and enthusiasm. He was legitimately a really, really good kid. And I don't know if as years went by, I mentioned on an earlier program about Roddy Piper, of knowing Roddy when he was like a young Brad out in L.A. and spending a couple of days with him and staying in his apartment that one. There was his little one-roomer one night. And getting a chance, we got a chance. We talked a lot of. Roddy was a very sharp guy. We talked about a lot of stuff besides wrestling. So, but then years later, after he'd had his immense success, when he came to Atlanta, he was a different guy. The good thing, I don't know if I mentioned this. I got to see him when he got inducted into Waterloo. Did I mention that?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
good.
He kind of got back into the old Roddy that you had known before. So that was a good in regards to your last meeting. But
I was glad he recovered.
Yes.
That he had gotten his, I don't know what you want to say, his soul or his esprit de corps. This guy was heavily accomplished compared to most wrestlers. He made movies. He was super talent. So
with Brad's passing, I didn't see it coming. Obviously, he died at 50 years old, and so I just, while you were talking about Roddy there, I Googled it real quick because I figured maybe something had come up, because at the time it was really hush hush. There really wasn't a lot of information out there on Brad's passing, but it looks like his brother Scott Armstrong mentioned a couple years ago that Brad had died. He had some heart issues and died of a heart attack at age 50. So, but I've said it before on some of my other podcasts, but Brad to me is a top 5 guy. Maybe not top 5 in drawing money, but when as a fan, I want to go back and just watch wrestling matches. You can put on a Brad Armstrong match, and I'm there for it. Like, he was just that talent. So.
Oh, he was great, and what a personality! He was the nicest guy, and no way a stooge. I mean, he was somebody. I mean, he didn't come around trying to be tough, but he was in good shape. He looked good. I mean, he wasn't terribly big, but he wasn't. Can't think of it why anybody in the world, when I knew him, would ever be mad at him for anything, because
right.
He was just this bundle of joy, really. Effervescence. He was a kind of boy. If everybody in the dressing room had his attitude, going from Brad Armstrong talking about a match to Buzz Sawyer is like going directly from heaven to hell.
Wow.
Exactly. From heaven immediately to hell.
Well, that's a great analogy, I would have to imagine. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Brad. You don't hear a lot of wrestlers that don't have some kind of negative story going on about him. But, years ago as a fan too, I remember when Brad came out with those old famous shoot interviews where they'd sit down and interview a guy about his career. Brad had a lot of stories to tell, but he stopped so many times. I can't tell that story. Like you do, like what you did with the Sheik. I can't do that. Tell us about I can't do that to Tom Pritchard. I can't do that to so-and-so. So, I mean, Brad was very protective of the boys and the relationship he had, the bond that he had with everybody. It was 20, 30 years later, and he's like, yeah, I'm still not going to do that. I have no reason to do that. I admired him for that, but I hated him. Well, I don't want to say hate's too strong of a word, but as a fan, I'm like, damn it, Brad, I wanted to hear that story. You know what I mean? But
well, you got to think about the family of the wrestler. Their children are probably still alive. Mm-hmm. And maybe their wife is still alive, have brothers and sisters, who knows? You don't want to say something horrible that diminishes their memories of their father or their brother or their, So, and just to tell a story. Now, with people who were the same way to their family, I don't have that much of a problem talking about their behavior, because their family says, oh yeah, that's them. Because it was the same way with them. Mm-hmm. But with someone like Brad, I didn't know much. I didn't know him personally. I don't remember ever riding. He was a baby.
Right.
I don't remember ever riding in a car with him, but I know I liked him a lot. And, Bob Armstrong was always a class guy, fun to be around. And before he had that accident that just ruined his face, here you got a nice-looking guy, woodsy and folksy and just, all good humor, wanting to amuse and be likable and be liked by the people around him. They were a pleasure to be around. The Armstrongs are really a good family.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, I see a name here, Bob. In the first week you're in Georgia, a name pops up that I don't know how we haven't crossed this name before. But on February 10th in Canton, Ohio, Tommy Rich and Stan Hansen defeat the team of Bob Roop and the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff. I don't know that we've had Ivan in any of your results before, teaming or any otherwise. So, do you have any memories of Ivan Koloff?
He was a good worker. Well, Ivan was a contradiction at times. He was a really stand-up guy, good guy. You liked him. He worked out hard. He looked great. He did his gimmick great. He drew money. He could work great in the ring. He was a pleasure to be around. But he did have a bad period when he was hanging around with Buzz Sawyer. Oh, I remember one time we had rented. We still had the Lincoln we were driving around in, and I took him and Buzz and somebody else. I took them to a town, and Ivan and Buzz were riding in the back seat. And on the way down, there was no problem, but it was a maybe 200-mile trip. When we got back that night, I had to help both of them out of the car. I mean, I had to help them out of the car and help them get inside the hotel. And they weren't smoking pot or anything. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have cared if they did, but they obviously were doing downers because they were both just, they were conscious, but it was like almost to the stage that Tommy was one time. But I had to help them in. And then that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was that they had bought some beer and some chips, and they bought these red-colored barbecue crisp or something, a big bag of them, and they had spilled about half of the bags and a beer or two on the floor of the back seat of this Lincoln Continental, and then they'd had their feet in it for 100 miles, moving their feet around and grinding it into the. Oh man, it cost me $100 to get the thing fixed, to get it cleaned. I couldn't clean it myself. I tried, but that was just an isolated incident. I would give him a 95 percentile of total approval about his work ethic and because he's obviously a very talented guy and everything. But that one incident, you have to wonder. You have to look at a guy and say, well, here's a guy that obviously is disciplined because you can't stay in that kind of shape unless you're working out regularly on a regular basis, and a good worker. Lovely guy, just the nicest guy in the world. But that thing put just a little sour note. And I was never close to him. I don't remember ever being alone, he and I on a trip alone, where I'd get a chance to personally get to know him. But I liked him. I respected him. I thought he was a good talent, good guy to have in the dressing room. One of the boys, most definitely. And he was humble too. He wasn't didn't have a big head. He didn't, he wasn't taking liberties based on his position on the card or anything. So, yeah, good guy. I'm happy that when you first said it, I didn't have the right Koloff in mind. I didn't have Ivan in mind. I was thinking about somebody else. He was a good one. Great talent. He drew money. Very believable. His interviews were good. He was a positive asset. Him doing and reflecting now on that, as far as the car and all that, I don't hold that against him because at the time he was probably he might have been in his 40s. Yeah, he was a good guy. I respected him and liked him, and that one incident didn't turn me off because I had my own bad nights like that. I mean, not quite in that direction, but ones where I kind of let myself go too much. So I could empathize. I just didn't expect it from him.
Right. No, I get it. You expected a little more, but again, some people are just messy people too, right? So they don't even realize it. But I get it, man. You guys are renting these lovely cars, and some people are damaging them. Obviously, we've talked about that in the past. But in this instance, that's going to take the money for them to clean it up. And Buzz Sawyer being part of any story doesn't really surprise me. So he tends to have that effect on people. Kind of drags them down a little bit to his level, if you will.
Yeah. Well, his level looked like a good time, get stoned out of your mind and, eat and drink and get loaded. A lot of people like.
You told that story where Ole had sold that car, gave that car to Buzz or whatever it was, and within a matter of days or weeks or whatever, it looked like it, been brand new, looked pristine when it left Ole's driveway, and by the time Buzz got done with it, and I'm not talking years later. I mean, just whatever it was, weeks later, it looked like
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, looked like a hunk of junk. So
he drove through a demolition derby on the way to the match.
Well, that might have been fun to watch.
Well, it had dents in it, and it was filthy inside. Had a crack in one of the windows. I mean, he was a trasher.
The stories that car could tell if it could talk, right? So.
I can imagine, yeah.
Well, you talked about Buzz again. You brought him up. So that got me to thinking, because he's here during this time frame. His brother comes in. First is Brett Wayne, because they don't want to acknowledge that they're brothers. Brett is a up-and-coming baby face at the point in time. Buzz is still a monster. So eventually, though, it comes out that they're brothers, Brett and Buzz. Buzz turns babyface. They're a tag team, and etc. But do you have any memories of dealing with Brett Wayne Sawyer?
Yeah, a few. I shouldn't have been with it being in the wrestling business, but I still had a little bit of a mark in me, I guess. Compared, Buzz wasn't big. Buzz was burly, but he was only about 5'9" or 5'10" at the most.
Right.
Probably 5'9". He weighed 220, 230. No, he was burly. He looked good. He wasn't fat or anything. He had a little pork on him, but not much. And he had that look, with the bald head and the mad dog look and the way he acted. He was very believable. Well, Brett wasn't like that at all. He wasn't a madman. He wasn't a partier like his brother was, and he wasn't anywhere. He was smaller than Buzz. If he weighed over 190 pounds. I'm surprised because he wasn't big at all. And the matches were okay, but he couldn't project with the Road Warriors, both guys, you had the level of intensity. It didn't matter who was in there, hawk or animal, but not with Buzz and Brett. Buzz was like, Papa Bear, and Brett was like Baby Bear. I do remember one of the byproducts that poor Brett had of that being Buzz's partner was that every time Buzz got into any kind of a schmozzle argument, potential fisticuffs, potential fight, gunshot, whatever it might be, Brett, if there was another guy, Brett was Buzz's partner in this, whatever this problem was.
Sure.
Brett was going to be involved in it. If there was fighting involved, shooting involved, or whatever was going to be involved, Brett was going to be involved in it too. And where it came to a head was the night in Grand Rapids where Buzz didn't like the finish, and he refused to do it against the Road Warriors. So Buzz says, "Well, we're going to go out there and shoot." You should have seen the look on Brett's face. Brett's saying, "Well, let me think. What's one of the Road Warriors is the weak one that I can get?" Well, wait a minute. Neither one of them can rip me limb from limb in about 5 seconds. Yeah, so the look on his face, and they actually went to the ring with no finish. It was going to be a shoot. Oh, Brett he looked like death warmed over. But yeah, Buzz would put people in situations like that. I don't know if it was just being a prima donna or what, but I remember Brett was very quiet too. I don't remember ever talking to him much about anything. And again, it might have been because I was management in terms of running those shows, and also that obviously Buzz didn't like me. one of the reasons Buzz didn't like me was because Ole and I got along so well. And Buzz loved Ole, and he loved Ole's attention. He's one of those people that want all of somebody. They don't want somebody liking anybody else. They want it all. So he resented that. And I think that might have been just now occurred to me after all these years later. That might have been the reason he gave me so much crap was by changing, even though it was Ole's finish he was turning down, he was turning it down for me. And then I had to go call Ole, and then he had to go, Ole would tell him to call me. He'd talk to Ole, and he'd come back, and the finish would be probably just about the same, but he might have changed one thing. I don't know. And that might have been Buzz's way of saying, well, Ole went with me instead of you, Roop. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact, but it's just a thought.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/RasslePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
You weren't in Buzz's head, and God forbid you ever Buzz's head. I don't know anybody that would want to, but would you say that Buzz wanted to be, and this is kind of the wrong analogy, but like a teacher's pet, or do you think he looked more at Ole like a father figure, like he wanted to be the most favorite son or something?
I think it's the latter. I think it's the father figure thing. Ole was quite a bit older, and an authority figure. We went on in detail about this. He ran things. It's his way or the highway.
Well, if you were looking for an authority figure, that would.
Oh, yeah. And that was another thing I admired about him. I admired a guy who said what he thought without having to swerve you for half an hour into getting ready for what it was. Mm-hmm. He would just come out and say, well, you're a piece of crap. Get out of here, or you come in here asking to be a pro wrestler. You got a gut on you, it sticks out 6 inches. Come back when that's gone and maybe I'll talk to you. Stuff like that. I admired that. He didn't have time. We talked about this a little while ago. Mm-hmm. He didn't have time for schmoozing. He was making money every second, and every second he wasted not aimed towards making more money to him was a waste of time. And I don't blame him a bit because the guy was a millionaire. How can you argue with success? I mean, unless you're a drug cartel or something, you have financial success, but you're a scumbag, or cigarette manufacturer, booze manufacturer, whatever. They might be wealthy, but, they should be ashamed of themselves. But I think Buzz looked at Ole as an authority figure, and maybe, it might be a little both. Could be a little both.
Gotcha.
He knew that the top guy, the guy running the show, had a special place for him,
sure,
in his feelings, and that had to mean a lot to him. And to this day, I never asked Ole. I never asked Ole, what the hell do you see with that guy?
Fuck? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. How can I never asked him because and I wasn't going to stooge Buzz off. That wasn't my deal. First of all, it's not my MO. It's not how I do things.
Sure.
I've been a booker myself. I can handle problems. But also, I felt like doing that by going over to Ole with a problem, I was showing him I couldn't handle it. So I didn't want to ever do that. That was another reason I wasn't going and telling tales. But and there wasn't anything I couldn't handle. I could put up with Buzz's crap. Now, back to something we talked about a little while ago, I didn't feel my job as a road agent entailed cleaning up the backseat of cars and getting crap and stuff that's grounded to the floor. I didn't feel that in doing that at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning before the stuff, congeals, and instead of waiting until the next day. I didn't look at that as being my job. But, apparently it was. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody else to do it. But you know what? I did it. I mean, it's part of the deal.
Yeah.
It's not always, people talk about, show business is so glamorous. It's so wonderful. No, it isn't. It's horrible. What you have to do, say you're on stage for 10 minutes, mm-hmm. like an average match is 15 minutes, you had to work about 12 hours to get to that 10 minutes, So I guess it's worth it. But what the fans all saw was a 10 minutes. And now what you and I are doing, actually, we're filling in the rest and talking about how we got to those 10 minutes.
Right, exactly. And everything going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I'm so pleased to be able to do it now. But no, Buzz, I think, he was happy. He was happy to have Ole's affections. I don't know how Ole could respect him, but maybe he did for some reason, some different reason. Maybe he knew something I didn't about Buzz. But anyway, this was an Ole. None of any of the things we've ever said about Ole comes anywhere close to the Ole that he was to Buzz Sawyer.
It's definitely a different animal. Definitely, it's always been a weird dynamic. And even though it's it's a quote unquote work on TV. If you go back and watch when Buzz comes in from Florida to Georgia and they turn him heel almost immediately, and Ole starts coming out Ole hasn't even really been on television during this period. He's been just behind the scenes. But when Buzz starts working, Ole starts coming out during the commentary on those matches, only those matches, and just putting Buzz over to the moon. This guy, he reminds me of me, and he just loves to hurt people. And Ole's just doing everything he can to get this guy over, and even working with him in tag matches sometimes on TV when Buzz first arrives. So before he develops that Mad Dog character completely. So Ole was, took a liking to him immediately, it seemed like. So there was something there from the beginning. And I don't know what it is either, but yeah, it's very peculiar indeed. And I'm sure that won't be the last time we mention Buzz Sawyer here, because...
Let me mention him again before we leave him.
Sure.
He was an amateur wrestler.
Yes.
In fact, apparently, I think it was in Florida, somewhere. I worked out with him. I didn't remember it. Vaguely I remembered it, but he was, before he got into business. He had been an amateur wrestler, and, I was much bigger, but I also, was an Olympian, so I handled him easily. And I don't know, maybe that was the reason he didn't like me, because, I didn't try to embarrass him. The only guy I ever tried to embarrass was Dale Lewis. But
no, I think Buzz was like a state champion down there.
Very, very likely.
Yeah, I think.
But, like I say, I was a heavyweight. He was a light heavyweight. He was strong and all that, but I was much older and more mature. And when I worked out with guys, I never tried to hurt people. I never tried to show them up. I just would wrestle with them like typically a wrestling practice. You get together and you're out there and you try to take each other down. But I had no trouble. I had no trouble dealing with him. That might have been a reason he didn't, he had no affection for me. I don't know. I don't think anybody else down there, that group that he was working out with, I don't think there was anybody else down there that could handle it. But
no, in fact, I Googled Buzz's background, an amateur here. He was a state champion at the 191.5 pound weight class. And in 1976, he placed third nationally, losing in the semifinals to Dan Severn, who would go on to win everything. And of course, everybody knows Dan Severn went on to be the UFC, the original big top star of the UFC back in the 1990s, going into the early 2000s. And so Dan the Beast Severn out of Michigan, if I remember correctly.
Do you have the results of the Severn match, what the score was?
No, just this is just a basic overview that Severn beat him in the semis, and Severn went on to win the whole thing. So, but to place third nationally is pretty damn good, I'd say. So yeah, I could see where Ole might respect that out of Buzz.
That was, what? First I've heard of that. That's the first time I've heard this. I didn't know he was a state champion. I didn't know he was a national. Sure, Ole would respect that. Now, Dan Severn, I've been to Dan Severn's place. In fact, my son Ryan trained for mixed martial arts at Dan's studio in Coldwater.
Okay.
I had to do something, can't remember who it was. Somebody called me and wanted me to go to Dan and get an interview for television. Instead of flying him into Atlanta, I was retired. I was living up here in Michigan, but somebody called me, and because I'm close, Coldwater's about 50, 60 miles from here.
Right.
They asked me to go down to his place and take him to a local TV place or a place where he could do an interview instead of having to fly him into Atlanta or whatever, wherever it was. I don't remember. I'm not sure if it's Atlanta even, but yeah, I went to his place, and he had, by that time he had done the mixed martial art things in South America, or down there with the I can't think of the family, but
the Gracies.
The Gracies, yeah.
Yes.
And he won one of those things, and he showed me. Well, he's got a place. He's got like 4 big barns, all put. That size, and inside he's got one area. It's got a amateur ring. That's where he trains a lot of guys, and he's got another room that's just a mat. It's got all just mats on the floor for amateur wrestling. And on one wall, there's a ledge that goes, I'd say it's about, let's say 15 yards long. And every bit of it was covered. It was about 1.5 feet deep. And we came up from the wall about 1.5 feet. Every inch of that ledge was covered with trophies.
Wow.
I had to be 200 or 300 of them. I got 4
I believe it.
I got 4 or 5 in my house. from all my years. I've got my Hall of Fame stuff, but these trophies are national. And I didn't go and look and see what they're all for, but he was accomplished. And there was one guy. There's some guys. There's some like this Gable guy now, Gable Stevens.
Yeah.
There's guys. I look, I say, oh, thank God, I didn't have to wrestle that guy when I was wrestling. Oh my God. I wish I had a better attitude and say, oh, you know what? I wish I could have wrestled that guy. No, Severin, no, and this Gable, no. But yeah. So if he did Severin, and that's why I asked the score. If he managed to keep him getting pinned by Severin, then he was pretty salty. So
yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's a good deal. I was looking at what Buzz was doing during this period, and it looks like Tony Atlas comes in. So we're going to get to this Tony Atlas story here in a minute. Tony comes in around March of '83, and he's gone by the end of May of '83. So there's a fun story out there of what happens with Tony Atlas during this period. So he's working with Buzz Sawyer, it looks like, and then Tony just randomly disappears from the territory. Can you explain what happened with Tony Atlas?
Of course. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, before he came in, Ernie Ladd had been booking him in Mid-South. Ernie Ladd called me, and Ernie and I got along well enough that when I was in Mid-South, he invited me out to his house a couple of times to have a Sunday lunch. So, and I really respected Ernie a lot. A guy to be an all-pro football player, and then a top pro wrestler, and a guy who wasn't afraid to go in the South and say things like, come on down to the ring, white boy, and I'll kick your butt in Georgia or Alabama or Florida. Back in the day, before civil rights even, the legislation had been passed. A guy like that had my total admiration as somebody having a lot of guts. Anyway, Ernie called me and he said, use him for 8 weeks, Bob. 8 weeks. He'll last 8 weeks, and then he'll do something. And I didn't listen. I should have listened to what Ernie said, because it was about 8 weeks, and he was getting over. The thing is, it's hard. A guy comes in, he gets over, and immediately he starts drawing. He'd only been there, like a couple of months, and he was booked. The week he disappeared, the following Friday, he didn't show up on Monday. And the following Friday, he had a cage match in Macon. So within a couple months, he had already established, an angle and gotten enough heat to be in a cage match. Shows some talent. He did get over. He knew how to get over. Well, what happened was, now we bring back Paul Orndorff. He and Orndorff apparently were in the same car riding back from a town. And I think it was a Saturday night. I think we talked about this a little, because I remember talking about Atlas getting a bear hug on
yeah, I remember
Orndorff.
that. Yeah, right.
Well, they were supposedly going to fight, shoot. They're going to shoot.
And this is one of those stories where the boys just pull over on the side of the road and going to settle their score here? Is that how this
yes.
Okay.
I never had that happen in a car I was in. I mean, not against me, but even people I was riding with. There could be two people in the car that get in an argument that want to stop. It never had to happen, which I'm glad. I mean, who wants that kind of crap? But anyway, they got out, and never got in detail. I never talked to either one of them about what happened. But he had the bear hug, and apparently Paul Orndorff bit or ripped it, grabbed his ear, bit it or something, and he tore his ear partially loose. So that ended the shoot, and they had to take Tony to the emergency room, or the next town they came to. They looked for some place to take him, and they get it sewed up, and we never saw him again. He disappeared. So he didn't show up I don't know if we had the Omni next night or not, I don't remember, but he didn't show up, and so we started looking for him. And Louise Bennett, who was his office secretary, was calling around, and she was, by the way, one of the best executive secretaries, I think, in the wrestling business. I can't imagine anybody being any better. She knew so much about everything and could handle any of it. Just a really talented lady. a nice friend of mine, nice girl, a woman. But she ended up calling Tony's wife in, I think it was L.A. or somewhere out west. And the wife didn't know, no, she hadn't heard from him, hadn't seen him or anything. And so what Ole did, Tony had a check, I think, for $1,600 a week before. Now, in today's money, what's that, $4,000? Ole stopped payment on his check. Well, what happened is within, the very next day, I think, the wife calls the office. And she says, hey, I went out and spent $1,200, and all these people were calling me saying my check bounced. She said, what's going on? Where's his money? Louise had been, instructed how to talk to him. I picked up the phone as soon as Louise and I could see each other from where we sat in each. She was in a room, but I sat where I could see her if she needed a signal to me or something. I picked up the phone and I heard all this part, and Louise said, "Well, we need to talk to Tony. Unless we can talk to Tony, we're not going to be able to do anything about it." And she said, "Oh, okay, Tony." Yeah, he'd been there the whole time, and would deny being there. He didn't want to talk to anybody, so he had to talk to Ole, maybe just Louise, and she booked him. He had to, all the other matches you missed were bad enough, but the cage match in Macon, imagine having to cancel that.
Oh,
you can't substitute for somebody in a cage match. So he agreed to come back. Louise got him a ticket. She made a ticket for him from L.A. to Atlanta. And she said, "Okay, Ole, I got him booked." And so, and she said, "You want me to, make his check good?" Ole said, "No. Let's wait a minute. Let's wait and see what happens." So we waited about, an hour or two. And Louise called the airlines. And what turned out, Tony, yes, he had taken the ticket to Atlanta, but from Atlanta, he had booked another flight that was going out about an hour later to Charlotte. So in other words, he wasn't coming back to Atlanta. He wanted to get that check cashed and, get the money, and then he was going to screw us anyway. Of course, Ole never reinstated the check, so it cost him $1,600, but it was about 8 weeks. That's what Ernie Ladd told me. Give him 8 weeks, and he'll self-destruct. So when Mulligan, this is an enduring memory, and I'll repeat it again. And Tony I've seen a few things he's done, and he admits his own frailties and his mistakes and all that. And I don't have any I don't think about him, but I don't have any lasting enmity towards him because you carry that stuff around. It's just poison. But I do remember when Mulligan knocked me down and still had me down and was on top of me trying to pound me to mush. I remember Ole Atlas being just a couple feet away going, get him, Jack, get him, kill him. And, I never forgot that. I never did anything to the guy. He might have thought that, okay, I worked in the office. So that thing in Atlanta was...
You're immediately an enemy.
Yeah, but, to wish for one of the boys to get the crap beat out of him, I was one of the guys. I didn't care if I was a booker or not.
For anybody that wants a little more insight, I got a piece here written by Brian Blair in regards to the fight, if you want to call it that, between Atlas and Orndorff, and I was going to share Brian Blair's memories of it.
Please. Oh, great. Please do.
He said, I guess it all started at whatever city you guys were at, whatever show you guys were at prior to this car ride. Tony gets the finish, and he's got to do a job. And he starts slamming all the steel lockers in the place we were dressing at, says Brian Blair. Everybody was on their tippy toes. You don't know what this guy's going to do. Tony wasn't normally that grouchy. The next thing I look, and he's got a syringe full of 3 cc's shooting him into each butt cheek. The reason I know this is because he told me so. This is more steroids that I can imagine taking in 10 weeks, and he's taking it at one time. Tony is saying, nobody can kick my ass. Maybe Andre the Giant, but I could probably kick his ass too. He's just going on and on and on. Finally, we get in the car. And the story goes on here, and basically it's just Tony in the car constantly complaining about how he could beat everybody's ass. And Paul Orndorff is, I guess Tony's, I don't know if Tony's riding in the back or in the front, but Paul's in the back because he's behind Brian Blair, according to Brian anyway. So he's listening to these guys go back. And Paul says, would you shut the fuck up finally, Tony? And Tony says, I can kick your ass too, Paul. And so obviously Paul says, you ain't going to kick my ass. You might kick somebody else's ass, but you're not going to kick mine. And I'm thinking to myself, Brian Blair says, oh shit, this is going to be a fight. Atlas says, let's pull over and I'll kick your ass, Orndorff. Orndorff says, yeah, let's pull over. I said, man, you guys don't want to fight. Paul says back, either you pull over, Brian, or I'm going to kick your ass. So Brian said,
oh my God.
Blair said, okay. So he pulls over. I love that response.
God. Yeah.
Tony jumps out and he starts making his arms go back and forth, pumping his chest up and down. He's got a World's Gym tank top on and his jeans and his cowboy boots. Orndorff's got a pair of sneakers and never wore underwear. He's got a pair of red shorts on and a sleeveless t-shirt. I'm ready to watch. I want to see what happens. I've already seen what Paul can do. I have no idea what Tony can do. Oh my God, this is insane. So it goes on, like you said, from there that they get into this scrimmage, and Tony has claimed, and I've read his version, that he held Paul in a hold, and that's why Paul bit his ear. I know you said something about the bear hug type hold. Basically the story at this point, everybody tells it the same. Somebody has somebody in some type of a hold, a lock, if you will, and then it leads to Orndorff biting a piece of Tony's ear. We go on. So we get to the part where the ear is bitten, and Brian says, all of a sudden, I heard a scream. Tony yelled, you cheated. He's got his ear, and all of a sudden, Orndorff spits out a big old piece of flesh. Oh my gosh. He bit his ear off. He's crying.
Oh my God.
Atlas is screaming, Paul, I can't believe you bit my ear off. That's cheating. What a way to look at things. Oh man. Paul says, there's no rules in fights. Whoever told you there was rules in a fight?
Exactly.
Paul told Tony to get up, you pussy. Atlas had to go to the hospital. He had plastic surgery. Oh my goodness. They had his ear in a Burger King napkin. My goodness.
Oh my God. I didn't realize it got that bad. That he bit the whole thing off. Even a lobe, any part of it. Yeah. I mean, that's about disfiguring. You got to get that fixed, or you're an object of scrutiny. I mean, people see you coming, unless you got a hat on covering your ears. People see you coming, you're unbalanced. You got an ear on one side, nothing, or a little stub on the other. He had to have it fixed.
It's amazing that he sees his ear laying there, and his first response is, you cheated. Like, it's just a hell of a response.
And these are grown men.
Yes.
I mean, as much as men ever grow up, I feel like there's still some boy in me, but Tony could think that you're going to get out and fight with somebody, and if you're going to, like, say, wrestle, okay, we're not going to, no punching or whatever, we're going to wrestle, and you take the guy down, you pin him, or you hold him, or you put him in a submission hold that he gives up, that would be one thing. But to say I'm going to kick your ass, that means most of the time you think of somebody going to be pounding on somebody, and to go out there and to get a hold, and then to be surprised when the guy assaults you,
right?
When you say you're going to kick his ass, well, what does that mean? So I mean, kick your ass is a very ambiguous statement. That could be anything from, like, if you're arm wrestling, you beat the other guy, to kicking his brains out in mixed martial arts. Kicking him in the face 9 or 10 times. I mean, I've been in fights where there's blood everywhere on me and the other guy too. Knives and guns involved. And so, when you say fight, and then you go out there and you get a hold on a guy and he bites your ear, I mean, Tony, what were you thinking? What do you think a fight is?
According to Brian, it started in the locker room in regards to Tony just saying he could whip everybody's ass. Obviously, Brian makes it sound like it's all these extra doses of steroids that Tony's injecting far beyond what he needed.
Oh, very likely.
Nevertheless, whatever caused it, whether it was drugs or anything else for that matter, Tony's doing this for hours on end, it sounds like. And finally, Paul's just fucking sitting there. He has enough of it. He's like, shut the fuck up. And Tony's like, I'll whip your ass too. And Paul's like, no, you won't, motherfucker. And then they pull over and, but again, we're going into a fight. I tell you I'm going to whip your ass, and we step outside the car, and then I lock you into a hold that's not really hurting you. Where do we go from here? Somebody's got to do something. I'm not saying that biting people's ears off is the way to go in life, but I mean, I can see why that was something Paul did. It was like, well, what are we going to do? Lay here for an hour? Because we're not really progressing here in this fight. So
listen, we talked about, again, let's use the junkyard dog and Lex Luger up there in Canada as an example of a fight. That fight lasted 10 seconds. The dog junked him down, stuck his thumb in his eye. Luger started screaming. The fight was over. 10 seconds. Now that's a fight. That's a real fight, because if Luger hadn't given up, he might have had serious damage or even lost an eye. Mm-hmm. If he tried to bite Dog's hand, Dog might have stuck his thumb all the way in that eye. I'm not sure he would have pulled it out. Dog was a good guy, but Luger had insulted him and tried to upstage him, and then Luger started by pushing him. But anyway, the point is, in a fight, and we're talking about grown men here, and here we are, we go out there. Now here's really, really what's so ironic. You go out there in your match, Tony, in making a comeback, might punch a guy, say it's a tag team match, and he's coming back on both heels. He might throw 30 punches, and he gets in a real fight, and doesn't throw any punches. What the hell are you talking about? You got training. All these years of fighting in the ring shows you what a fight's supposed to look like. You're supposed to be pounding the crap out of a guy with your fist, or a stick, or a baseball bat, or a chair. Yeah, a chair. We pick up chairs. We pick up ring bells. We take corner ropes in the turnbuckle and strangle people. We do all kinds of stuff in our mock fight. And you get in a real fight and you want to get a bear hug or an arm lock. Anything that allows a guy to get close enough to your face to bite you, he could have bit his nose off. And I mean, that one's really hard to fix.
Right.
And make look normal. It takes several operations. When I was in the service, I was stationed at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, which is the burn center for the U.S. Army. And there were all kinds of patients there, people who had been burned, where their whole, like one guy had been in a tank that was on fire, and it burned his whole face, burned his ears off, burned his nose off. It didn't kill him, of course, but he was there to have surgery but I mean, he looked like a skeleton's head with just skin on it, and his eyes, of course, and his mouth, but his lips are gone. So they were doing radical surgery. I mean, they were replacing his ears and his nose and all that over a period of time. But you talk about disfiguring. I mean, I saw a bunch of these poor guys that had been, and women, who had been burned like that. And so I have the experience of seeing that. I know what someone looks like when they've been really savaged and, ears gone. Mm. And so that you would let somebody in a fight get close enough to do that, you deserve to be exactly where Luger was. He shoved Dog and then just stood there like Dog wasn't going to do anything about it.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, where did you guys learn to fight? That's not the way to fight. You start the fight by hitting the guy in the back of the head with a baseball bat. You don't try to kill him.
Fight too.
You don't try to kill him, but or maybe just come down on that trapezius muscle next to his head as hard as you can, and he won't be able to raise his right arm. Then now we can start the fight. So, thank you, Brian Blair, for that firsthand. Now we know exactly what happened. It's just as ridiculous. But you know what? I'm also glad to hear about the steroids. I'm not happy he was doing it, but I'm happy that it proves he was crazy at the time.
Right.
That gives kind of an excuse.
Brian said he did about 10 weeks worth in that one motion. So kind of crazy to think about.
When you're doing that, one time in with the Road Warriors, I went to pick them up and they weren't quite ready, so they had me come in the room and wait. It was cold out, so they had me come in to wait. And while they were late, they needed to take their roids, and both of them filled up a big syringe not the little skinny ones like for flu, but the bigger ones like for amoxicillin or something like that.
Wow.
And they used 3 different bottles, a cc of each. So each syringe was filled, like the plunger was pulled back like 2.5, almost to the top, and they shot each other in the buttocks with that, and so I understood. I talked in another program about Animal throwing that bottle of Gatorade at that poor old woman at her car when we passed her. And it was that's the kind of crap that steroids does to you. You lose your sensibilities. You're not thinking right. And our business too. I don't remember ever having a serious talk with anybody in my car ever about really beating people up. Who's the toughest? We never talked about, well, who can take who's the toughest, who you want to fight. We're the exact opposite. We had guys that can't fight a lick. We have guys that couldn't beat their wife and go out there and beat Big Bad John or make Andre the Giant look, halfway formidable, vulnerable, because the other guy's making them look that way. Well, in a real fight, the other guy's not going to make you look good. He's going to try to make you look dead. So, anyway, well, Tony's still around, and I hope Tony, I hope you're doing well. No hard feelings, man. You had a right to resent me, I guess, for your time in Atlanta there. I mean, I did work in the office. And,
no, I mean, the story checks out. Everything checks out. I mean, it's funny, too. You do see, if you go back and look at Tony's career or in the history, his where he was in Mid-South. He leaves Mid-South and immediately pops up here. You had your conversation with Ernie Ladd, and Tony comes over to Georgia. And Ernie Ladd warned you, I'm telling you, Bob, you got 8 weeks. You got 8 weeks with him. But you didn't listen. Yep. You didn't heed the warning of the big cat. And do you want to guess exactly how long Tony Atlas lasted in the Georgia territory? Give me a guess, Bob. How many weeks?
Either 7 or 9.
It was right around 8 weeks. Yeah, 8 weeks roughly.
Yeah.
So
I knew it was close.
Listen to Ernie Ladd. He knows.
Yeah. You don't think when a guy gets over, Tony was a great talent.
Yeah.
I mean, that body was unbelievable.
He'd been in Georgia before. Yeah, he had worked, on top in Georgia multiple times, working against Harley Race for the NWA World title and whatnot. So Tony had definitely, done it all here, particularly in this territory on TBS in the past in 1980, 1981. So I get where you're coming from. Like, a guy this over isn't going to screw it up. He must know what he's doing out there. And but it's just a matter of time. Apparently, it feels like, at least, during this run.
Well, you're making top money. You're driving down the road. The first week or two he got there, he didn't make $1,600. He might have made half that. But now all of a sudden he's making, today's money. What are we talking about? $3 or $4 grand, and he's making it, and he's over. Everybody loves him. He's a baby face. He's safe. He doesn't have to fight for his life, and like the heel does, and he screws that up. Now, there's all kinds. Dr. Psychobabble wants to speak up and say that there's some people that can't stand success because their self-image is such that it puts too much pressure on it. They don't think it'll last. A lot of times, the person who feels that way thinks that the things that they're worried about, like other people's opinions and feelings and all that, are negative. But that wasn't Tony's case. The people he had to worry about was the audience, and the audience loved him. So why would that? It has to be that it being successful, there's a syndrome called when good things happen to you, sometimes it creates a lot of pressure because you worry it won't last. So you make it end yourself. That way you get that pressure off you because the worst happened, but you made it happen by quitting. Maybe that's it. Can you think of any rationale for that?
Maybe, sometimes it's just people self-destruct without even realizing it. I think people just have, what do they call it? ADHD, to a different level in regards to, this is great, but I got, whatever. This is whatever. Yeah, I've heard stories of other talent doing similar things, just kind of, I don't want to say self-destructing because Tony still, I guess he eventually did, because he burned out his bridges and won too many times, and couldn't, even when he was in the greatest shape, physically looking. I don't know about wrestling wise, but physically looking, when he was at his peak with his muscles, you would have thought Vince would have used him during that period, but even Vince was like, Tony, I can't touch you right now. Now, later on, when Tony was self-admittedly homeless, so to speak, Vince did give him a job briefly to get him back on his feet around 1990-91. But Tony, he had a book many years ago, came out, and it was called Too Much, Too Soon. That was the name of the book. He, admittedly, I was given too much too soon, and I didn't know how to handle it. So I think he answers it himself to a degree with the name of his book.
I think I read that years ago. I admired the guy for all the work it takes to get that big. I mean, you got to work out. You got to work like a maniac. Now, the roids, of course, help.
Sure.
But there's a big payment. Hawk died at 43. The two guys, Hawk, the Road Warriors, guys I talked about seeing shoot up in that hotel room, he died of a heart problem at 43, and Animal died at 60. Animal in his later years looked great. He didn't look his age. He was wealthy, and he came to Waterloo a few times, and we reminisced. We didn't spend any time. I don't remember if we even had a beer together, but at the gatherings, where all the people were at, we chat and reminisce about our early days. But even him, but having a millionaire or having $1 million in the bank doesn't protect your health if you've ruined it somehow by what you did earlier. And it doesn't take. You don't have to have a bunch of things go wrong. If you have one thing, I mean, right now my lungs are affected, and I'm healing, thank goodness. I had a heart check a while back. That's fine. Everything else is fine. I don't have any abdominal problems, no circulatory problems, but actually the lungs. Now, of course, you need the heart first, but the lungs come second. Because if you can't breathe, I'm telling you, man, I think I said this already, but folks, protect your lungs. When you can't breathe, I don't care how much money you got. I don't care how many people love you. When you can't breathe, none of that matters, because all you know is you're extremely uncomfortable and worried if it's going to get worse where I can't breathe at all. So that's my advice. It's the first time in my life I've ever had problems with my lungs, and I'm never was a smoker. By the way, anybody who cares, I'm seeing an expert now. I'm seeing a pulmonologist, I believe they're called, to find out exactly. I had a little relapse, and I started getting the same thing I had before, but I went back to my personal physician right away and got more medication. I got on Friday, so I'm here on my fourth day. I'm feeling a lot better. And when I say better, my breathing is easier. I don't know if there's anybody out there worried about me, but anyway, I just want to let you know that I'm very happy to be here talking with you today. But protect your health, folks. It's the one thing that you need to be able to enjoy everything else you might accomplish.
Very well said. Some people, especially the younger class, they think they're Superman out there. But, I got to speak, and, I hit 40 several years ago now. But once I, hit 40, I was like, oh, shit, I have all these issues that maybe I should have looked at, prior to now. But so, yeah, it's like I just got my first pair of glasses last week, Bob, and I probably needed them for a couple of years. Not probably. I know I needed them for a couple of years.
Well, good for you. I got mine about the same age, around 40. I started with mine, and I've worn them all this time.
Hey, 45 years without glasses wasn't too bad. And I told the doctor,
No.
I know I'm walking out of here with glasses because I can't see shit close up very well. And he checked my eyes and he goes, and you're on the computer all day, every day? I go, yeah. He goes, and you don't get headaches? And I go, no. He goes, wow. So he was kind of marveling at the idea that I even existed still at this point without glasses. So.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, so we're rolling, though. We're rolling right along in life. And, just another great episode. Go back to Georgia and talk a little bit about, the Sawyers. Ivan Koloff, Brad Armstrong again pops up. We got a lot of names to come here. I'm looking at 20 to 30 names right here around this time. But before we wrap up, I just want to say I see the trend you were talking about where you didn't really feel like wrestling as much anymore. You come in at the beginning of February and you're protected very well on the card. I mean, really, you do, save for a few tag matches, you do a few jobs to Tony Atlas and you get into a feud with Ronnie Garvin and Garvin's going over there. But outside of that, they're protecting you strong on all the house shows you're going over. Of course, you're winning squash matches in both hours of TV every week. But then somewhere around the middle of the summer, Bob Roop tends to very much slow down in regards to wrestling in the ring. So I'm assuming that's going to be where the agent job starts to come into play a little bit, right, is the summer of 1983. So we'll get into that next time. We'll also get into a ton more names here. Now, I don't know if you have anything on some of these guys or not, but just to kind of tease some of the names to come for the fans out there, the listeners, I got Larry Zbyszko is here on this list, as well as Ole Anderson, Dutch Mantell, Terry Taylor, Paul Ellering. We talked about him in the past, but Paul's here. He's a manager and a wrestler sometimes at this point in time. We know the Road Warriors are coming because Matt Bourne is going to leave. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And, of course, the Road Warriors, never enough Road Warriors stories, so we'll talk a little bit more about Hawk and Animal. Ted and Jerry Oates. I don't know if you have anything on them, but they were Columbus boys, Columbus, Georgia, that is. So they'll be coming in and out of here. Just a lot of names, like Killer Brooks, lots of names here to look at.
Oh, good, yeah. Oh, yeah, I dealt with. I was there with most of those guys and, have memories of them. In fact, just about all of them fond memories. I try to forget the negative stuff, but like sometimes, like with Buzz, when it's all negative, you can't remember anything but that. No, that sounds good. I like the reminiscing. It brings back good memories. We have a tendency, the guys that were on the road, in the road generation, where we drove every day for sometimes, some territories like, 3,000 miles a week. You don't want to remember the 3,000 miles. But if something happened, of note, like, for example, the Orndorff Atlas fight, for example, if something happened of note on one of those trips, I'm glad to remember that or to learn about it. And I appreciate you having Brian Blair's version of what really happened, because I often wondered, something that happens, and I want to pass this on to folks, because there was another incident that I was completely wrong about what actually happened. I can't remember if it was Jake the Snake or something, but what happens is, these stories are all 30, 40, 50 years old. And when you've told a story the way you think it happened, and you've told a story and you remember it, and if you've told a story, say, maybe 4 or 5 times in all those years, by the time you get 50 years later, in your mind, that's what really happened.
Right.
But that's not always accurate. So if that happens with me, I'm apologizing in advance. I mean, sometimes you might try to make something seem more exciting than it was, or you leave something out that was important. With Atlas, I didn't know about the steroids. That explains a lot, because that wasn't the first time. That wasn't the first time he was taking them. He was taking them every day, or every week, or I don't know how often they did it. But I tried steroids one time. I was getting older, and I had to go back to. We'll get into this when McMahon took over, and we started another TV show. I got my tights back on for a while. We'll talk about that in the future. But I remember once trying steroids. I think it was I don't remember what it was. I took 1 or 2 doses. I didn't like my attitude. I started getting angry. I started, being nasty, and I didn't like that. So I quit doing it.
Okay.
Well, you had a lot of guys coming in that, I was getting older, and like when I got to Ole, I was 40. That's not old. You might feel like it is, but I don't. I was 27 when I started, so I hadn't been around that long. But I just that youthful enthusiasm was gone. At 40, you should be at least starting to be a man of some kind instead of just a boy. But anyway, thanks for today, Ray.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our folks out there, I want to remind you that and I know Ray does too, we really appreciate your taking your time to let us share our story with you. It means a lot. I hope in the future I can get to some places where I can personally interact with anyone who's listening to this program, and thank you for doing so. That's something I look forward to.